A more recent disappointment. Usually they are well revered. They were praised all around for their amazing games that they had come out with, but unfortunately, as of late, they released two main titles that I'm going to be talking about: Fallout 76 and The Elder Scrolls Blades, that have been very diffisappointing and have put them in deep crap. And then we're going to be talking about microtransactions, which is the main sort of guiltiness of these companies. What are they? Who are they targeted to? What is the money made by them? And why should they be stopped? So let's start with Electronic Arts. They're an American gaming company headed by this guy. He has a very weird name. I forget what it is. Doesn't matter. They're a AAA developer, which means that they are the biggest kind of developer is a AAA developer. There's a AA developer, single A developer. Single A developer means an indie game. It means a small company that works out of a small office making games regularly. They usually have a lot of stress. They don't make as much money. They don't look as flashy because they don't have the funds to make these things look as flashy, and they usually only have one base. AA developer, they can already have two bases, two places where they operate. They have many more people. They have a lot more money for funding, but they don't have as much money for marketing. So therefore, their stuff doesn't really show to the public as much as as AAA developers would. And this is a AAA developer, Electronic Arts. It's very famous. They put a lot of money into marketing, and they're known for being really scumbaggy. So they make sports games like FIFA, Madden, and NBA for all sorts of years. So they started way back in about 2011, 2010, depending on which game you're looking at. They're all sports games, and ever since about 2013, 2014, at least those versions of their games, they have started adding in microtransactions, ability to pay for player packs, and loot boxes, which is, it's a system that we'll go over when we get to the microtransactions parts. It's not very important right now. Point is, they inject all these scummy techniques to make players pay more and pay more and pay more while they're playing the game. And it's gotten to the point that they need to they've run out of ideas for their sports games, so they're just releasing them more often with less updates. So they make a whole new release, a whole new game, with a few little graphical updates, with a few little mechanical changes here and there, so that the players will think, okay, at least the really dedicated players will think, oh, there's been a significant change, something has happened, when in reality nothing really has changed, and they're just looking to squeeze out another $60 out of you to buy for the new game. Recently, they released a game called Anthem at about January, and it was heavily criticized because it was supposed to be made over 6 years. It's a six-year period. Where they were supposed to have worked on it, BioWare, the company that made it, but unfortunately, it released and a lot of people hated it. It was repetitive, it was very grindy, you had to work a lot to get a few items, and the items that you did get were not very impressive because the whole game is centered around the items that you get. And if the items that you get aren't impressive, if the loot that you get aren't impressive, then what's the point of playing the game? And it was also riddled with microtransactions and all these scummy business practices. And then they're notorious in the gaming community for being greedy and selfish. They generally don't care about their audience. When a big outlash comes against their game, for example, like Anthem recently, they didn't really say anything about it. They didn't apologize. They didn't put any press releases out. They just want your money. And they came, and because of them, the gaming community has learned to never pre-order. They have learned that EA always comes out with day one season passes. So the day that it comes out, they already have more content that you can pay for. Again, for another $20, you can buy an $80 game instead of a $60 game. And for that $80 game, you'll get exclusive items and pre-release sort of exclusivity things when they could have just included that in the base game, and everyone would have it. But they want more money. They want $20. It makes up a lot of money, unfortunately. Let me just skip by. Come on. I forgot to do the pictures. Anyway, Activision is next. They're an American gaming company. They're headed by that guy down there, bottom right. He's known for, he recently was revealed to take a lot of money from the company. So he's been taking millions and millions from the company. And because he's done that, and because all this bad press has come out about him, there isn't a lot to say about Activision itself as of late, because all of Activision has been focused on publishing games through the developer that they bought recently, Blizzard. Now, Blizzard used to be a very, very well-respected company that made very good games, and World of Warcraft and Overwatch are some of their, well, World of Warcraft is a very old release, Overwatch is a recent release, and Hearthstone is a bit older than Overwatch. They're also a AAA developer. Their main franchise before buying Blizzard, when they were actually making games, with their parent company, Treyarch, not parent company, sorry, sort of friendly company, they work together. Treyarch, they mainly made Call of Duty. Nowadays, they don't make as many Call of Duties. It used to be a yearly franchise that they would make every year, just like FIFA would be. But because they've sort of discontinued that a little bit, I've kind of put a little bit of leniency on the fact that they've stopped making yearly content. Instead, they're just making all of their money through Blizzard, through their games, Hearthstone, Overwatch, and their microtransactions, which are loot boxes, card packs, and in-game purchases that you can buy within the game, extra content. They're also known, for shady business dealings with other companies that aren't really disclosed to the open, but a lot of relatively trustworthy articles have come out about them not putting their money where it should be, paying their executives more and not paying their developers properly. And yeah, they're well known for always making the same games. Bethesda, who was very, very popular until recently. They're owned by ZeniMax Media. ZeniMax Media is run by that guy right there. Also a very weird name. But Bethesda themselves, who I'm going to be focusing on, are the actual developers of the game, and their executive producer is this guy named Todd Howard. Todd Howard is very popular. He's become a meme. The internet loves him up until he released Fallout 76. Because they're known for Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. Bethesda made these two franchises and made them incredibly well. Fallout 3 was the last praised one. Fallout 4 wasn't really liked. And the Elder Scrolls Skyrim is still adored to this day. I play it. I love it. It's amazing. Definitely try and play Elder Scrolls Skyrim if you can. So they were well known for making good games. But up until recently at E3, which is a gaming conference, they showed a game called Fallout 76 that they would be releasing sometime January, February. Unfortunately, it released, it was filled with bugs, it was filled with crappy microtransactions, everybody hated it, it was boring, it was annoying, it was laggy, it did not work. And he promised that it did work. So lately he hasn't been as popular, and they still haven't properly apologized for it. Yes, so, and also they released a mobile game called The Elder Scrolls Blades, which is one of the worst things I have ever seen come out of this company, worse than Fallout 76. They tried to make a mobile game based off of The Elder Scrolls, but they packed it with the worst ideas I have ever seen. And the latest microtransactions are in-game purchases and the occasional loot box, where it would get so bad that you could pay $18 to get a blue skin on your mech. You could literally paint it blue for $18. Who doesn't want that? Nobody wants that. So yeah, they come up. There's their logo. That's Fallout, and that's Skyrim. Now let's go on to actual microtransactions. The true devil business practices. So these are loot boxes. This picture specifically comes from Overwatch, but they're all over the place. It is a big surprise nowadays if a AAA developer doesn't come out with a game with loot boxes. Because it's so expected nowadays, unfortunately, that a game will have loot boxes because the company wants to keep making money off their players. And 50 loot boxes would cost you $60, but they go as high as $99. You could pay $100 and you'll get about 100 loot boxes that are all filled with randomized items. Random items means you don't even know what you're gonna get. You're not gonna get what you want. So, what are microtransactions? Their in-game purchases of varying costs. They can go from very low to very high depending on how many of that certain thing you want. Well, either loot boxes or card packs or whatever. They are mainly funded, the reason that businesses use them is they're funded by whales. Whales are people that spend enormous amounts of money on the game, and they live an everyday life. They live a life where they can support themselves, but they spend every single penny that they get on loot boxes and microtransactions, and that's the only reason that companies keep doing this, because they make an enormous amount of money off of this about 10% of people that pay for microtransactions. They make up all of the money that they make on microtransactions. So they're usually in the form of loot boxes that contain a random assortment of items, and each assigned with a different rarity, epic, legendary, and if it gives you that real rush of dopamine when you get that rare item. It's understandable why people like it, and in the mobile industry especially, this is very common to see. Games will actually prompt you, and when they give you tutorials as to how to play the game at first, they'll actually introduce you to microtransactions and say, you know what, quick, spend this gem right now so that you can finish this thing that usually would take super long, and you can get it done immediately. But wait, you actually have to buy gems with real money. So they're there specifically to screw you over and make you pay as much as possible. And they're $99 for 13,000 Call of Duty points. Call of Duty points mean nothing. They're things to make your gun look prettier. It's dumb, anyway. They're known to be addictive. They use gambling techniques. They make things extra flashy. So when you open a crate, lights flash everywhere, colorful things, things that your brain likes. And in casinos, they do this too. If you see machines that you pull the lever down and it shows all these blinking lights. And then you get 777, you're like, oh my god, that's crazy. It's the exact same thing here. You get legendary, 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 and you go absolutely nuts. It's everywhere. They're widely hated among the gaming community because they ruin progression. They basically take away the power from the player to get what they want through the time that they spend on their game, and they just give the power to the person with the most money. And the worst by far it gets to this is pay to win. And when a company makes a game that is pay to win, where you pay for a loot box, and if it gives you something that will literally make you better than other players, that's when a company is really hated on. Their stocks drop. So EA and Activision, they try this a lot. They try to make pay to win games where people will pay to be better at the game. However, thankfully, the gaming community has always come together to make sure that never happens. Unfortunately, it's still large. Loot boxes are a thing, and I don't think they're going away very soon. So who are the microtransactions for? For adults, they're for whales. They're for adults that can spend a lot of money. But they're also for kids, because companies know this for a fact, that despite the fact that they might have an 18+ symbol on their game, or a 15+ symbol, there are kids that are going to be playing their game. They get the game through their parents, and that doesn't matter. The fact that they're playing the game isn't a real problem. I think kids should be able to play, frankly, most of the 18+ games out there. But the problem is the fact that the companies know that there are kids playing their game, and they still inject dangerous, addictive practices into their game that lure kids into buying things that they don't need. So they take their parents' money and they buy stuff. Companies know this. The money racks up fast. You don't even know how much you've spent until you've spent it all. It's absolutely insane. When you see how much you've spent, it's disheartening, really. It makes you feel the worst you've possibly been, because although you might have spent all of this money, you might have gotten that huge rush of dopamine from the opening of the loot box. You might love the fact that it opens and shows all these colors, and it's cool, and getting that rarity is amazing. In the end, when you actually see what you've done, it feels much worse. So I was also a victim of this. I played a game called League of Legends for a very long time, and I spent, unfortunately, an incredible amount of money that was supposed to be going to something else, but from my parents. But instead, I sneakily spent it on a game to get in-game purchases. So I know from first-hand experiences that these things are dangerous, and although I don't think they're going away very soon, I think they should go away, and thank God something's actually being done about them. So, what is the money made by microtransactions? It's hard to tell. It is really hard to tell how much money is made from microtransactions, not only because companies keep this secret because they don't want the information out there, but also because it's constantly changing, because they're constantly making money. So you can tell how much money they've made per quarter, but the problem is that you can never tell how much money they've made specifically on microtransactions because they don't specify that. So although FIFA 19 sold over 24 million copies across its lifetime and made $3 billion, or 2.3 billion pounds, that's off of its sales alone. At least that's what they say, it's off their sales alone. But it is for a fact that EA makes $1.3 billion a year off of extra content just across the board. So they sold a game, the actual content that they made, about a third of that they also made from people that spend money on their games. So they made a third more money for literally doing nothing. They did nothing and got a third more money, more profit off of their video games, which is ridiculous. Fallout 76 sold 1.4 million copies in total. It's so little because people realized by that time don't pre-order, and they didn't. Thank God they didn't. And it sold, 24 times less than FIFA 19, which is crazy. Why is it disappearing? Okay. Now we just skip forward. There we go. Why should they be stopped? Well, they're addictive. They're harmful to children, and they squeeze way too much money out of customers. People spend thousands and thousands and thousands in the span of, in the span of a year. They spend thousands of dollars on this, and it's crazy. It's unnecessary, it's predatory, companies know that they're doing this, and there are much better games out there that do a much better job made by smaller developers that I would always encourage players to go to if they're ever feeling frustrated with these companies and with companies in general trying to squeeze as much money out as possible. Go play stuff that actually inspires you, makes you creative, stuff like Minecraft, stuff like Stardew Valley, stuff like story-driven games that only ask you to pay for the story, and there are no multiplayer aspect whatsoever, because microtransactions are almost always in multiplayer games. If you are playing a single-player game, they can't make money off of you because they can't constantly change it. And also, you have complete freedom to control the game that you bought. So, the last thing I have to say is that if legislation comes up in your country or wherever you live, and currently in America they're holding up legislation to ban loot boxes or to restrict them somehow or to cause them to, be less marketed or just make them 18 plus or something like that and truly enforce these laws, do it. Vote, because if you don't vote, nobody will care.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow.